Welcome to episode 15 of this series on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Last episode we rounded up Frankenstein's narrative, and now we find ourselves back with Walton on his ship, writing letters to his sister.
The reminder that all the information so far has been contained in a letter is intended to again solidify the realness of Frankenstein's tale. It's all the more believable because it's given legitimacy through documentation. Walton even goes so far as to implore his sister to believe him.
His tale is connected, and told with an appearance of the simplest truth. Yet I own to you that the letters of Felix and Safie, which he showed me, and the apparition of the monster seen from our ship, brought to me a greater conviction of the truth of his narrative.
This documentation is strengthened further by Walton's rigorous note-taking of Frankenstein's tale, which Frankenstein himself then corrected and augmented to make sure they were telling the truth. Huge efforts are being made in this section by Shelley to strengthen the idea that this happened and there's evidence to support it.
Frankenstein's desire to correct and augment the notes could also be taken as a sign that Frankenstein is unwilling to relinquish control of his narrative. This allows for some doubt to creep back into the documentation, and therefore ensures the presence of the other right up to the end of the text.
The second letter from Walton documents the perilous situation he and his ship find themselves in. The sublime mountains, with their snow-topped peaks referenced by Frankenstein in his tale, have become mountains of ice that threaten to crush Walton's ship. He and his sailors fear that their expedition is lost and that they are soon to be dead. But Frankenstein inspires them to press on in pursuit of the monster. Walton describes the impact Frankenstein's words have on his crew. While they hear his voice, they believe these vast mountains of ice are molehills, which will vanish before the resolutions of man.
Amongst all the men he's travelling with, Walton feels great affinity for Frankenstein. At the beginning of the novel, he complained that he had no one to talk to. Now he has found a peer in Frankenstein, and as a result becomes as morbidly obsessed with the pursuit of the monster as Victor. His obsession, and the increasing danger of the expedition, eventually leads to the crewmates threatening to mutiny if they don't turn back. Their rebellion is culled once more by the words of Frankenstein, who cries out, "Behold, with the first imagination of danger, or, if you will, the first mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away, and are content to be handed down as men who had not strength enough to endure cold and peril."
It's unusual that Frankenstein is so determined to drive others closer to death, considering his despair at causing the deaths of his loved ones in previous chapters. It is a sign of just how obsessed he has become with the monster, but it also marks a return in him to that boundary-pushing scientist who first created the monster. He once again feels the pull to push limits and go where others will not, and should not.
Frankenstein's desires are quickly cut off, however, by Walton's next letter, wherein he simply expresses that he has been forced to return to safety. "I come back ignorant and disappointed," he writes to his sister. In the next letter, he confirms that he went against Frankenstein's wishes and turns back with his crew.
This decision marks Walton's departure from Frankenstein's path. But it also triggers Frankenstein's death, as he can no longer pursue the monster, and that seems to have been all that sustained him. Before his death, however, he delivers a kind of confession to Walton.
In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature, to assure, as far as was in my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty, but there was another still paramount to that. My duties towards my fellow creatures had greater claims to my attention, because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery.
Frankenstein acknowledges his responsibility for both the death of his loved ones and the life of the monster. He admits that it should have been he who cared for the monster, nurtured it, ensured happiness and well-being. He has not abandoned the desire for vengeance completely, however. Even as they turn back, he asks Walton to finish the job he set out to do. However, he doesn't want Walton to be consumed by the job in the same way he was.
Seek happiness in tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discoveries. Yet, why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes, yet another may succeed.
These are Frankenstein's final words, and they are ambiguous. He is both conscious of the pain and suffering that he has caused, but his final lines pose the idea that while he has failed, others may yet succeed. Even in death, Frankenstein is a conflicted character that will be taken as a warning by some and as an inspiration by others.
Frankenstein's death also hails the arrival of the monster, and interestingly, it isn't Victor, but his creation who closes out the novel with his narrative. The monster launches into a final account of his life, saying that the completion of his demoniacal design to ruin Frankenstein's life became an all-consuming passion. Now that it's complete, he mourns his loss.
Walton is having none of it, and challenges the monster directly in a way that no one else but Frankenstein has.
Hypocritical fiend! If he whom you mourn still lived, still would he be the object. Again would he become the prey of your accursed vengeance. It is not pity that you feel. You lament only because the victim of your malignity is withdrawn from your power.
The monster responds by making further intertextual remarks, once again linking himself with the figure of Satan.
The fallen angel becomes a malignant devil. Yet even that enemy of God and man had friends and associates in his desolation.
Without Frankenstein, the monster is once again alone and consigned to isolation by his own actions. Realizing this, the monster leaves the ship announcing that he embraces death, presumably planning to end his own life in isolation, just as it began.
And that's the novel. There are still 2 more episodes in this series, however. Next, we'll discuss a few key quotations, and then finally we'll consider how you should approach the exam questions and how to answer them. That's all for this time, though, for the moment. Congratulate yourself on getting this far and take a moment to mull over everything we've talked about. How do you feel about the novel? Did you enjoy it? What themes most interested you? Those will be useful clues for what areas you might like to focus on in your exams.
More on that next time. Until then, thanks for listening.